Several weeks ago, Mr. Sabin announced that he would be retiring at the end of this year. There are very few, maybe only one or two or three others, a handful, half dozen at most, individuals who have been associated with Jesuit High School for a longer period of its history than Mr. Sabin. I would say it's about 52 years if you start from the time he came here as a freshman. And for more than 4 decades, it's true to say that Joe Sabin has been, really for those 52 years, he's been the epitome of a dedicated and loyal student, alumnus, faculty, and administrator of Jesuit High School. A graduate from the class of 1966, Mr. Sabin was actively involved during his time as a student here, participating in student council, writing for the Tiger, the student newspaper. He served as editor of the Tiger his senior year. He was also involved in the Quill and Scroll Society, as well as the Sodality. After completing his undergraduate education at the University of South Florida, Mr. Sabin taught 1 year in the public school system before coming back to Jesuit in the fall of 1971 as a math teacher. That same fall, Mr. Peliquin and Mr. Charette began their teaching careers here. Mr. Sabin remained in the capacity as a math teacher until 1984 when he entered the guidance department. He served our students well in that role for 19 years. For several years, he was the department head. And then in 2003, he became the first lay alumnus to be principal of Jesuit High School, a position he held until 2011, a span that secured his legacy, making him the longest tenured principal in the school's 115-year history. In 2011, he rejoined the faculty in the math department, where he has continued to teach for the past 4 years. Throughout his time as a Jesuit staff member, faculty, guidance, principal, he has devoted himself without reservation to the good of the school and the student body. 7 years ago, when I came here as president, Mr. Sabin was the principal, and he welcomed me with open arms. He was a constant source of support for me. We had regular meetings, always discussing the issues of the school, the needs of the school. And for Mr. Sabin, it was always about a focus on the student body. What's good for the development of the students? What's good for the students' well-being? And that's part of his legacy as principal and as a staff member here at Jesuit. Mr. Sabin is an outstanding example of a man for others, and we have been truly privileged that he has shared his talents with us all through these years. Joe, on behalf of the entire student body, faculty, staff, and alumni of Jesuit High School, I thank you for your loyal and dedicated service to the school. We will miss you, but we know that even as you enjoy your much-deserved retirement, you will continue to be a supporter and presence at Jesuit High School events. Thank you, Mr. Sabin. I would now like to invite Mr. Charette to say a few words, since, as I mentioned, he and Mr. Sabin, along with Mr. Peliquin, began their careers as faculty members together at Jesuit in 1971. Mr. Charette.
Good morning. You hear me? Good. Okay. Sometimes in class I'm not sure because I've got people staring at me for no reason. I'm going to take you back to 1963 to start off. In 1963, I was a senior here at Jesuit. I was one of the editors of the Tiger newspaper. And at that time, a young boy, a young freshman, who had been raised in Ybor City and was very eager and pleased to be here at Jesuit, became a member of the newspaper staff. And I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to him, but I did notice that he was very eager to serve. I'm going to fast forward now to 4 more years later, 1967. In 1967, I had a position at USF in the student government. I was the director of public relations. Lord knows why. but during my year in that position, we had a vacancy in student government, and it was filled by a Jesuit alumnus who looked vaguely familiar to me. Turned out his name was Joe Sabin, and he took over as press secretary in the department that I was in charge of. Now we move 4 more years into the future, 1971. In 1971, after having taught for 3 years at another school, I came to Jesuit and noticed another familiar face in the group of new teachers that year. And that was when I began to wonder, who is this guy and why is he following me? As it turns out, it was Joe Sabin. In the 44 years that have passed since that time, I have come to know him quite well. I have worked with him as a colleague. He's been my boss for 10 years, and he has been my friend for the entire time. 44 years is a long time, and I know most of you out there haven't come close to experiencing that. So I want to take you back a little ways and just fill you in on what it was like in 1971. In 1971, there was no cable television. So ESPN, MTV, all those other channels that you enjoy now, they didn't exist. In 1971, there were 3 networks: CBS, ABC, and NBC. There was no Fox anything, okay? Some people perhaps would like to go back to that time, I don't know. So since there was no cable TV to watch, I'm sure you wanted to absorb yourself in the local professional sports teams. Well, there were no Lightning at that time, no Tampa Bay Rays, no Rowdies even, the originals or the current. And in 1971, there were no Tampa Bay Bucks. So now what do you do with your spare time? Video games. Guess again. There were no video games. The first video game, Pong, hit the market about a year later. There was no IBM, there were no Apple computers, no iPads. Microsoft started in 1975. So it was a different world then. We actually wrote letters, not email, we wrote actual letters. And we conversed over a phone that was connected to the wall. There were no cell phones. In the years that passed since then, in 1971, Richard Nixon was president, and Watergate hadn't happened yet. So Watergate was a hotel in Washington, D.C. at that time. The first digital phones didn't show up till the 90s. In 1977, the first Apple II computer showed up. In 1984, the Macintosh showed up. And Microsoft started in '75. So it was, again, technology was limited to very large computers usually about one per space. At that time at Jesuit, I believe there was one computer on campus, and that was in the finance office. In 1986, several years later, we could look out to the east and see the contrails of the space shuttle from Cape Kennedy. It was the Challenger. So we actually could witness the aftermath of that horrible tragedy. In 1990, the Persian Gulf War started, a war that we still feel the effects from. In 2001, 9/11 took on a new meaning altogether, because that was when the terrorists flew planes into the World Trade Center and leveled the Twin Towers. And in 2005, Katrina became more than a girl's name, because that was when that hurricane devastated New Orleans area. And we've had our share of those in the years prior to that. Just a few other facts for you. In 1971, a postage stamp was 8 cents. A loaf of bread cost a quarter. A gallon of milk cost $1.32. And gas was 44 cents a gallon. Okay? The average car could be bought for $2,700. The average house, which would have been very nearly a mansion at that time, cost $42,500. And the average income of a working person was $9,111. That's how much has changed in the 44 years that Mr. Sabin and I have been here. We've gone through 8 US presidents, 5 popes, and 13 Jesuit principals. I decided at that point, when I realized I was going to get up here, I decided to post something on Facebook just to see what would happen. And I mentioned that I was going to be speaking, and I invited those of my friends who are former Jesuit people, both students and former colleagues, to make comments on my Facebook. I got over 40 likes. Okay? And I'm pretty sure they weren't liking the fact he was leaving. I think it was more that they appreciated what he had done. But they include a wide range of people. Most of these names won't mean much to you, but they will probably resonate with Mr. Sabin. People like Greg Budsman, who was a graduate from the mid-70s. Ann Connors, the teacher that the Social Studies Award is named after. Names that you would recognize, like George Bernalis. Former students like Kendall Amorico and Gary Anello, Scott Kennedy, Davis Powell, Luigi Frascarelli. More former teachers like Greg Moran and Amy Bousquet, Tony Perez. Parents of current students and former students like John Pedrero. And so it's quite a tribute to Mr. Sabin that these people took that time. Some of them even left comments. And I wanted to read a couple of those to you. John Juniette, who was here in the late 80s or early 90s, said the following. Mr. Sabin was always a very pleasant, peaceful, approachable teacher who almost always had a smile, as I recall. Bernie Petters, who lives in Dade City area, he and 2 or 3 of his brothers went through here. he says that he remembered Mr. Sabin's class and the things that Mr. Sabin did in class, and he passed those along to his son. And now he says, my son is becoming a math teacher. And he has heard most of these stories, and knowing his personality, he will try them in some form. These were some of the things Mr. Sabin did in class to keep people's attention. The one I wanted to read most to you is from Brian Walsh, another graduate from the 90s, who said the following. And this was when Mr. Sabin was a guidance counselor here. Had it not been for him, I would not have considered the college I attended, where I met a fabulous advisor who in turn steered me to a graduate program where I met my now wife, with whom I now have an amazing son. Couldn't imagine life any differently. Incredible how educators can put in motion such a course of decisions, but only do you fully appreciate it all in retrospect. And then finally, I was searching on the internet and I came across a book that I didn't know existed. It's a book written by Eileen Worth called They Made All the Difference: Life-Changing Stories from Jesuit High Schools. In that book, there's a chapter on Tampa Jesuit. And it talks about the football team that won the state championship in 1968 and how the members of that team made a sizable donation to the school. Somebody asked them, why would you do that? And this is what they had to say in reply. He said, we are the beneficiaries of people with vision, love, persistence, generosity, and hope. One of those persons we honor here today, my colleague, my former boss, my friend, Mr. Joe Sabin.
Mr. Charette is just a little bit older than I am. I want to first thank Father Hermes and Mr. Newberger for honoring me with this special convocation this morning, and of course Father Hermes and Mr. Charette for their kind remarks. 44 years is a long time, but what makes up my 44-year career at Jesuit? Let's take a look at some numbers, apropos for a math teacher, but mind you that these are approximations. These 44 years would include 7,700 school days and 220 planning days. 17 years as a full-time math teacher would include over 2,900 teaching days, about 15,000 teaching periods, and more than 2,400 math students. 4 years as the sophomore counselor would include 700 school days and 600 counselees. 15 years as college counselor would cover 2,600 school days and include more than 2,100 seniors with well over 8,400 applications. 8 years as principal would impact over 1,900 students. Add to this hundreds of faculty, staff, and administrators, along with thousands of parents. My association with Jesuit started in 1961 when my dad informed me that I would be going to Jesuit for high school. When I asked him what Jesuit was, he informed me that it was the school that my uncle had attended and graduated from in 1942. I had been at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Ybor City since kindergarten and had not really given any thought of leaving to attend high school someplace else. I took the entrance exam in the fall and received my admissions letter in April. It was dated April 13th, 1962. To hold my spot in the class, a deposit of $20 was required by June the 8th. $10 was the registration fee. The other $10 was a student activities fee. My dad paid the fee on June the 4th. Tuition at Jesuit back then was about $300. That was a lot of money back then, and I'm sure that my parents sacrificed significantly to pay it. At the beginning of the 62-63 school year, My dad dropped me off at the first canopy on Loyola Lane, and I joined my fellow freshmen. There were 92 of us. Our graduating class would number 76. At first, I missed my old school and was not really happy at Jesuit. A young Jesuit scholastic, Mr. Drago, helped me get involved in extracurriculars, and I quickly grew to love Jesuit. It was hard leaving after my 4 years here. I started at USF in the fall of 1966. I was a journalism major at first. Why not? I had been editor-in-chief of Jesuit's newspaper. I quickly switched to math and eventually to math education. The last semester of my senior year at USF, I interned in the math department at Hillsborough High School. I liked it there, and they wanted me as a teacher for the next school year. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, they did not have an opening for me. They sent me to teach at Dowdell Junior High School until a teaching position in math would become available at Hillsborough. I taught 7th and 8th grade basic and regular math. It was neither where I wanted to be nor what I wanted to teach. In the spring of 1971, I received an unexpected call from Betty Dewey, who was the registrar at Jesuit. I can still remember her voice and her words. "Joe, this is Betty Dewey at Jesuit. There's an opening in the math department here. Would you be interested in teaching at Jesuit?" I was floored by the opportunity. Immediately interviewed with the principal, Father Naughton, and was hired. I signed my first contract and was home. I was 23 when I started at Jesuit. I believe that I was the youngest teacher on the staff. I had no idea how long my career at Jesuit would last, and I really never imagined the opportunities that I would have here. At different times, I was encouraged by faculty and former teachers to leave Jesuit for what they considered to be better opportunities. It usually translated in their thinking that I could earn more money. One encouraged me to use my mathematics degree at IBM, which had offices on Jesuit's property at the corner of ML King and Himes. I made an appointment to interview for a position. When I stepped into the lobby of the building, it seemed a sterile, subdued, and lifeless environment. As I walked towards the receptionist, I kept looking around. What was missing? Answer: there were no students to give it life and vitality. I turned around and left. I never interviewed and never looked back. I was approached several other times by different people with opportunities outside of Jesuit, but I found that none were as good as what I already had. The years just seemed to have passed instantly, one after another, 10, then 25, and finally number 44. 44 years at one school or at one job is a long time. Looking back, it seems as if 1971 was just yesterday. It's hard to believe that it has been so very long. But then I look in the mirror and see those 44 years. Jesuit has opened many opportunities to me. I don't believe that I would have been in education for this many years had I not been at Jesuit. It provided me a career filled with so many different responsibilities and duties. It has not been boring in any way. Each day, each year, has presented new challenges and gifts, new faculty and staff to work with, and of course, new students. Jesuit would not be what Jesuit without the talented students who come here, open to growth, though sometimes fighting it. The fact that so many of them come back and place their sons at Jesuit is the best testament to the greatness of this institution. Jesuit has been much more than a job. In many ways, it has been like home over all of these years. It has been family. Jesuit has seen me through the highest and lowest points in my life. They stood by me during the loss of my parents and numerous aunts and uncles. They were there for my family in September, my junior year, when we lost my cousin who was in his senior year at Jesuit. They helped me celebrate my marriage and then helped my wife and me through her long fight with cancer and ultimately her death. Jesuit was there for me through my open heart surgery in June of 2008. Father Hermes steps into his new position as president at the end of 2008, of the school year in 2008, and his principal is preparing for heart surgery. He had to take on some of my responsibilities and not necessarily the most pleasant ones until I returned a couple of weeks later. There is no real way for me to thank everyone who has been an important part of my Jesuit experience for so many have had such a positive impact on me over these 44 years. It is impossible to thank all those who gave me the opportunities that I have been provided over these many years. I also cannot begin to thank the countless number of administrators, faculty, staff, students, and parents for their encouragement, understanding, love, and care. I have purposely not thanked any individuals by name, for there are too many of them, and there would be the possibility of leaving someone out. I love and respect all of them. I have been asked why I am leaving now. Why not try to stay longer than Mr. Charette? He's going to follow me in something else when he retires. We'll turn the tables. You know when it is time to go, and it is that time for me. It will probably really hit me this coming July, when there is no letter from Mr. Neuberger detailing the dates and activities of the opening of the school year. My upcoming retirement hit me in a positive way a few weeks ago, when I was asked if I needed to check my work calendar to make a 6-month follow-up visit with my cardiologist. I said no. Then I was asked if I needed a particular time for the appointment due to my work hours, and again I said no. That was a very special moment for me. It was in some ways a feeling of freedom. Jesuit will continue to be a part of who I am, for Jesuit has been such a central part of my life experiences. It has done so much for me. I hope that in some small way I have bettered this wonderful place. At the end of my internship at Hillsborough High School back in 1970, I helped an elderly teacher, Bessie Childs, who was retiring, pack up her belongings and carry them down 3 flights of stairs to her car, for she was not able to do so alone. My goal has been to leave while I can still carry my own things to my car. I think I have accomplished that. Please keep making the Jesuit experience better. May God bless each of you, and may He continue to inspire and guide this, His special institution. And I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.